In this video, we're going to take a look at the first section of Heather Douglas's paper entitled Bullshit at the Interface of Science and Technology. And what she's talking about in the first section of her paper is what she calls a bullshit of the isolated fact. In other words, what she means by isolated fact is bullshit that is produced, or that she claims is produced, when people cherry pick facts, when there's a bunch of facts that are relevant to a certain conversation, and then the person only grabs a couple of the facts that support their view and just ignore the other ones that might undermine their view. And she characterizes this cherry picking of fact, or appealing to only isolated fact, as being a form of bullshit in this essay. So like the last two videos, our central concern is going to be to assess her claim that these are actually examples of bullshit by taking seriously the analysis of bullshit that Frankfurt has given us. So let's just get into the examples. There's two central examples of this that she discusses in the first section of her essay on bullshit of the isolated fact. And the first one is the animal toxicology case. So we'll just start with a quote from her then. So this is on page 217. She says, for example, if a chemical causes liver cancer in rats and is consumed by many people, although no studies of human effects have been conducted, it would seem prudent to regulate the chemical, right? So if you've done studies on rats, and when you introduce the chemical into their systems, it causes them, many of them, to get liver cancer, then you're right to be wary that maybe human beings shouldn't be consuming this stuff. But, she continues, if one also knows that the rats have a substance in their livers that interacts with the chemical of concern to produce their cancers, a substance that is absent in humans, one will likely be much less alarmed, right? So if you discover upon further study and investigation that the reason why this chemical is causing liver cancer in rats is because rats have this substance inside of their livers that, when it comes in contact with that chemical, produces cancer, and we don't have that substance in our livers, then presumably your major reason for thinking that this chemical is dangerous to human beings would then just evaporate, right? Because it wouldn't apply to us just because it applies to the rats. So anyway, we're assuming that these are the facts of the situation. And she just sort of generally says that this would be the kind of circumstance that could easily give rise to what she calls bullshit of the isolated fact. So let's make it as concrete as possible so that we know exactly what we're supposed to be thinking about here. And again, I'm going to make this concrete in a way that she doesn't, because I think it's really hard to evaluate the example unless we have something very specific to sort of think about, a specific exchange between a couple of people. So let's say we have Mariana. Let's say she's an expert in animal toxicology, and let's say that she knows all of these facts. So let's say she knows that the chemical causes liver cancer in rats. And let's also assume that she also knows that, that there's this substance in rat livers that ends up interacting with the chemical to produce cancer in them, and assume she also knows that we don't have that substance in our livers. So she knows all these relevant facts. So let's say she's giving expert testimony on this or something like that, and someone asks her, is it dangerous for humans to consume the chemical? And let's say she responds by cherry picking some facts. She responds by isolating one fact and ignoring the other. And she just says, well, it has been shown to cause cancer in rats. So notice when she says this, she's cherry picking the facts, right? Because there's, this is a fact that it's been shown to cause cancer in rats, and that's definitely relevant to the question. But there's also another glaringly obvious fact here that is also relevant to the question that she's just not mentioning at all. That fact being that rats have a substance in their livers that interacts with the chemical to create the cancer that we don't have. And she's just ignoring that fact, even though it's entirely relevant to giving this person a truthful sort of answer to their question. So because she's cherry picking facts in this way, Douglas says she's bullshitting. This is a form of bullshit. So our question is that right? Is she bullshitting when she says it's been shown to cause cancer in rats? And I think it's pretty clear that this is not an instance of bullshit simply because her assertion is truthful, right? Just start by asking yourself the same question that we ask in every single one of these cases when we're trying to classify what's going on. Ask yourself, does she really believe what she's saying? Does she believe that the proposition that she is asserting is true, or does she believe that it's false? Or does she neither believe that it's true or false? And in this case, it's clear that she believes that it's true. It has been shown to cause cancer in rats. She knows it and she believes it. So when she asserts it, she's saying something truthful. So again, by definition, it just can't be bullshit at all, because bullshit is neither truthful nor untruthful. So what's she doing? Well, she's not lying, right? Because she's asserting something truthful, and lies are always untruthful. So what is it? Well, I think it's a pretty clear case of misleading, right? She's using the truth to be deceptive. She's asserting something truthful, namely that it's been shown to cause cancer in rats. And she's trying to deceive her audience, right? She's trying to deceive this person that's asking her the question, because she thinks that if she just says that one truthful thing, that the person asking her the question will then incorrectly conclude that because it's been shown to cause cancer in rats, that this person will then conclude, yeah, it's dangerous for humans to consume. And the way that she gets him to make that mistaken inference is by not giving him all the relevant information, right? She knows that if she tells him about the substance in the liver that rats have that we don't have, that if she gives him that information, then he will conclude that it's safe for humans to consume. But if she has some sort of reason for wanting him to think, for deceiving him and getting him to think that it actually is dangerous, she can achieve that goal of deceiving him by just asserting this completely truthful thing and then letting him rely on his inferential capacity to sort of generate this completely untruthful inference in his own mind. So it's a classic case of misleading, I think. She asserts something truthful, and her intention is to deceive him into believing this untruthful thing that is implicated by what she says, that untruthful thing being that the chemical is dangerous for human beings. But again, for our purposes, the real thing to note here is that it's just not a case of bullshit, even though she says that it is, because the assertion is truthful. Okay, second example is a little more complex. So it takes her several pages just to sort of explain it all. So let me try to sort of summarize it here so that we all have it clearly in mind when we think about the example and try to determine whether she's right or not, that this is a case of bullshit. So I'm going to call this the global warming case. So here are the facts as we know them. So from 1890 to 1940, that 50-year period, global temperatures were going up, but not at a severe rate, right? So there was some elevation in global temperatures. They were rising mildly or slightly. There were certainly greenhouse gas emissions and aerosol production during that 50-year period, but they weren't terribly significant. Aerosol production, I mean, she sort of explains this in the essay, but just in case you forgot, aerosol production is just, aerosols are like small particulates that can get caught in the air, like dust or like smoke or maybe a chemical of some sort, stuff that kind of just floats in the air. And so you generally have greater aerosol production when you've got factories, right, that are sort of belching all these pollutants out of their smokestacks. They get caught up in the air, they hang in the air, in these tiny little particulates. And so aerosol production just means a lot of that making its way into the air. So in this 50-year period, we have some greenhouse gas emissions, but not a lot, some aerosol production, but not a lot. That's what the bars just mean. It's not really significant. And global temperatures are rising sort of slightly. Then from 1940 to 1975, in this 35-year period, we have a lot of dramatic moves in different directions. So we have aerosol production and greenhouse gas emissions rising dramatically. And this is because of increased burning of fossil fuels during this period and increased industrial production. So because of both of those things, ballooning population on the globe, burning more fossil fuels, more industry, right? So there's more pollutants coming out of smokestacks into the air, aerosol production is going up, greenhouse gas emissions are going up as well. More cars are driving around and so forth. More coal is being burned to produce electricity, right? Also during that 35-year period, global temperatures are dropping, they're coming down, right, noticeably. Right? We'll talk about why that is in a minute. So in this 35-year period, we have the greenhouse gas emissions and the aerosol production going up. Simultaneously, global temperatures are coming down. Then, from 75 to the present, roughly, right, greenhouse gas emissions, of course, just keep going. There's just more people. We're burning more coal to produce more electricity. There's more cars on the road, et cetera, et cetera. So greenhouse gas emissions just keep going up. Aerosol production, though, starts coming back down. And the reason why, as she explains in the essay, is because aerosol production, one of the things that it does is it creates acid rain, right? So if you've got all these particulates that are sort of up in the air, then whenever it rains, they get caught in the rain brings them down, and it produces acid rain, which has devastating effects. So we figured this out, right, in the 60s and 70s, and so steps were taken to sort of mitigate this problem and try to eliminate aerosol production. So aerosol production drops during this period, even though greenhouse gas emissions are going up. And what happened to global temperatures? They started shooting back up very, very quickly, right? So how do we explain all this? The explanation for what's happening here with these increases and decreases with these three variables here, the explanation is that aerosols, when they are in the air, they cool the atmosphere, right? So the more particulates you have flying around, the cooler the atmosphere gets. And this is for pretty obvious reasons, right? Like if you have if a volcano explodes, right, and there's just all sorts of particulates, aerosols up in the air, they can block out the sun, right? And when they do so, temperatures are just simply going to drop on the planet. So what happened here is that even though greenhouse gas emissions were going up, and we know, of course, that greenhouse gas emissions tend to raise global temperatures, even though they were going up, the reason why global temperatures were dropping during this period is because aerosol production was also going up. And so the added particulates in the air were basically counteracting the effect of the greenhouse emissions, in fact, overcompensating for them, and then driving global temperatures down, right? Then, of course, when we drop the aerosol productions by putting scrubbers on smokestacks and so forth and eliminating this kind of pollution, then the aerosols that were sort of keeping the planet temperatures in check and actually helping them to come down, when those aerosols disappear from 75 to the present and the greenhouse gas emissions are still there, then of course, global temperatures just go right back up again. What she's describing in this case then, what she's calling another instance of bullshit of the isolated fact, or cherry picking bullshit, we might call it, is that you've got some, climate science deniers, or people that are trying to deny that human beings are causing global warming, that what they do basically is they just grab this data right here, right? They just go in and they grab these two little pieces of data right here, that between 40 and 75, greenhouse gas emissions were going up and global temps were going down. And if you just focus on those facts, you isolate them and you cherry pick them, it sure looks like greenhouse gas emissions don't cause global temperatures to go up, because greenhouse gas emissions are going up, but global temperatures are going down. But the claim here is that if you don't cherry pick those facts and you look at the entire situation, including the truths that we know about aerosol production, then it will become clear that greenhouse gas emissions are actually responsible for raising global temperatures. It's just that the reason why they happen to not be raising global temperatures in this 35-year period here in the middle is because the aerosols were counteracting their effect, right? So let's look at a quote from her and then consider a specific example of this supposed type of bullshit. So here's her summary of everything that I just tried to explain. She probably summarizes it better than I tried to do. The increased industrial output from 1940 to 1975 produced both more greenhouse gases and more aerosols, as we just saw. The cooling effect of the aerosols likely masked the warming effect of the greenhouse gases during the period, right? Which is why the temperatures went down in that 35-year period. And with the reduction of aerosols, with aerosol releases by industry from 75 onward, the warming trend reemerged. The longer lasting greenhouse gases were finally having their impact. Okay, so again, she's just saying the same thing that I just said. She's summarizing the details of this case. So let's make it concrete like we did in the last example. So let's say we have this person, this expert maybe, who knows a lot about the science of climate change and global warming. And let's assume that this expert here, we'll call him Vlad, let's say he knows everything in this chart. He knows all of these facts about aerosols, greenhouse gas emissions, and global temperatures. He knows all of it, right? He's not blind to any of these facts. And then someone asks him, well, does an increase in greenhouse gas emissions cause global warming? Since Vlad thinks that global warming is some kind of hoax or something, or maybe he's being paid by, fossil fuel industry or something like that to give, misleading, deceptive testimony. What he says in response to this question, does greenhouse gas emissions sort of cause global warming? What he says in response is this: come on. Global temperature records make it clear that our planet was cooling between 40 and 75. And this is precisely the time period in which greenhouse gas emissions started increasing the most dramatically. So see, he's just cherry picking the facts in the way that I described earlier, right? When he gives this answer, he's just going in and he's grabbing this fact that global temperatures went down from 40 to 75, and this fact that greenhouse gas emissions went up from 40 to 75, ignoring everything else, and just grabbing those two facts and asserting them in this kind of isolated way. This, of course, has the effect of making this non-expert over here who's asking the question immediately infer that greenhouse gas emissions are not causing global warming, right? Because he's just giving her the specific data that would seem to suggest in isolation that they're not causing global warming at all. So he knows that when he says this, she's immediately going to infer just what he wants her to infer, which is that greenhouse gas emissions are not causing global warming. So the question is he bullshitting, as Douglas suggests that he is? Well, I think this case is very much like the animal toxicology case, even though it's more complicated and has more factors in it. I don't think this is bullshit. And the reason it's not is because, again, he's just asserting something that's truthful here. Does Vlad really believe that global temperature records make it clear that our planet was cooling between 40 and 75? Yeah, he believes that. It's true, and he believes it. Does he believe it's true that this is precisely the time period in which greenhouse gas emissions started increasing the most dramatically? Yeah, that's true, and he believes it. So he's making two assertions. They're both true. He believes they're both true. They're entirely truthful. Therefore, according to Frankfurt's analysis of bullshit, at least as I've interpreted it here, or encouraged you to interpret it, this is not bullshit, even though Douglas says that it is, because these are entirely truthful claims, and bullshit is never truthful nor untruthful. So what's Vlad doing here? Well, he's not lying, because again, lies are always untruthful, and his assertion is truthful. He's just misleading the person that's asking him the question, right? Again, he's asserting something truthful. His assertion, his truthful assertion, implicates this other thing that is not truthful, which is that greenhouse gas emissions don't cause global warming. He's not saying that, he's implicating it, right? So because he's implicating this untruthful claim by asserting a truthful claim, and his aim is to get the person he's talking to believe this untruthful claim that he's implicated, this counts as a case of misleading, I think, and not bullshit.